Hello and welcome back again. Now we're on to our third new technique, allowing you to come up with something different and create children's content for children's books. And this is yet another interactive book. The last one was a Spot the Difference, where the kids are starting to get involved with the actual book. And this one, I want to look at what I call an alternative outcome book. Another word for it is a sorry, not a spot the difference, a what happens next book. So what we should normally do is we go to Amazon, take a look, see what already is there and what it looks like, and whether we can have a bash at that too. Alright, we've selected the Kindle store. It'd help if we could spell, and we go. And here we have an example. The Princess and the Pepperoni Pizza. What happens next? Okay, and what is a brief description? Welcome to the What Happens Next books. Here kids get to decide where they'd like to see the story go next. Now, instead of just a story, readers have all kinds of possibilities to choose from. So in other words, you're putting the child in charge. They're not just reading consecutively page after page. You're giving them the option as to where the story will take them. And I think kids really like this because they get a bit of control. So let's see if we do the preview and have a look here. This is an adaptation of Hans Christian Andersen's story, and I quite like this one actually because I think it's a bit tongue-in-cheek. They've taken the Hans Christian Andersen basic story but put a spin on it. So the options, what you basically have is whatever story you decide to come up with, write your own, outsource it, and then before you move on to the next page, you're giving the child an option as to what the outcome will be. To have the Queen put a pea in the Princess' bed, click here. And to have the Queen put a pizza in there. I like that. I think kids like that kind of humour. It's getting down to very basic slapstick humour. So I think more of that, then the better. To have the next page, and I can't tell from this because it's a preview whether they're actually putting this one page break in between here, but I would, between each option, you start a new page. And in fact, the one thing that's missing from here, and I think it's a big mistake, is actually not to have images, illustrations in between, because I think the kids like to look at that. But apart from that, I think it's a great concept to have the princess climb up and go to sleep, to have the princess not be able to climb up to the top of the palm, click here. And so you can get more and more bizarre options, and you can go off down different routes with the story. And so from the front end of the book, the child has got a very simple sort of click here or click here. From the back end, you've got to build the structure of this, and that's what we're going to do, show you how to build the structure of this. Not as hard as you think, it's just follow along and we'll see where it takes us. So the first thing I want to do is click on the very makings of a story, which I've done here to give you an idea of how to format the whole thing. Now, talking about formatting, normally I've mentioned all the way along that I'm going to show you the formatting right at the very end of the course, just before we upload. When I say formatting, I'm talking about just putting the content that you've created down in a layout that Kindle will accept. And the layout that I usually use, the basic layout, the manual layout that I use, is a simple Word document. It seems to work very well. But you have to do it in such a way that Kindle will accept it. You cannot just use a basic Word document. And I'm giving you this now because the difference between now and what I'm going to show you, the formatting at the end, is this: with this type of book, we will not be using a table of contents, because after all, a table of contents, it won't make any sense because the child is creating excuse me, a table of contents by the very dint of the options of where they take the next page. So this has to be constructed differently, but we're still using the basic format here of a Word document, and I'm just going to show you how to just construct a basic Word template that you can then use for each and every one of your books, actually. Okay. Right, so I've just come up with a simple title, Joe Has an Adventure, and we want to break it down in such a way Actually, before we go on with the story here, let's show you exactly how you format this page. We start by going to the home tab up here, and we select, click home, and we want page, we want page layout, and we want the size, and we select A5. Now A5 is the closest size from the Word document that'll resemble how the page looks on a Kindle. So more than anything else, it's just to give you an idea of how much you should have on each page. That's why I like to use that A5. We then need to strip out all the pre-formatting that Word normally has in a simple Word document, because it flows differently with a Kindle. There is a flow. There's no point we then go to insert, and we take out the header and the footer. So we click on header and click here, remove header, and then we click here, footer, and remove footer. Because there's no header or footer. The header and footer is where you have that half opaque text for indices and appendices and all the notations, footnotes that are often at the bottom of pages, and also where you have the page numbers. So the other thing we're going to do is take out the page numbers, and we click here for remove page numbers. I've already done that, because there's no point you putting page numbers in, because if it's read on a different size device, your page numbers just will get all out of whack. Kindle will do that. They'll put all the page numbers in, because even if it's read on a different device, it may be that the viewer is reading it at a different font size. So leave that side of things to them. And then we're left with a very basic Word document. And the last thing we need to do is ensure that we're using Times New Roman as a basic font. And the basic size all the way through should be 12 point. The only thing I'm doing differently here is the actual title. I'm using 24, and the headings, which I'm using bold, I'm using 14. Okay, so to create a new page, what we do is we put the cursor at the end of the last character, and we click insert, and we click page break. And that's the way that, rather than just letting the text flow onto the next page, when we finish one page, we click page break. And I'm going to click back to go back, because I've already done that. So the second page should be a very basic set of instructions, and again, quite tongue-in-cheek. I said this is a book with a difference. Most books, you simply click to read what happens in the next page. That's a normal book, but normal is boring. We might just want to do something like put that in italics and maybe red, something like that. What you do with this book, you are in control of what happens, and a carry on. You can write it the way you want. Try it and see what happens. Then I do another page break, and then we start the very first page. Now I think each page should be entitled with scene 1, but whatever it is, you should write down and know what the title is. I'm just putting scene 1 because it's a bit like an act of a play. So act 1, scene 1. And just coming up with some story. This is a very generic story I'm just doing as an example. So Joe was at school pretending to work. He'd been given a passage to read on the subject of geography. He was bored. So that'll appeal to the kids, kind of boring at school, and he fell asleep. There's bound to be trouble from the teacher. Click here what happens to find out what happens next.